Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. Back to our normally scheduled program, exactly. Amber and Niall on Friday.
Exactly. Team Friday on a Friday, although it's been a pleasure talking with you more days than normal.
Well, I'm glad you're not sick of me yet.
At all.
President Trump is responding to the news of Israel's strike on Iran. The president wrote in part on Truth Social, "I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest of words to just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire."
4 Iranian officials told the New York Times that Israel struck at least 6 military bases around Iran's capital, Tehran. Israel also attacked highly secured residential homes for military commanders and other residential buildings. Israel killed at least 3 of Iran's top generals and 2 nuclear scientists, according to Iran's state media. The Iranian Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said Israel, quote, "should anticipate a harsh punishment. The strong hand of the Islamic Republic will not let them go."
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Iran's nuclear program was a clear and present danger to his country's survival. The IDF said in a statement, quote, "The state of Israel has no choice but to fulfill the obligation to act in defense of its citizens and will continue to do so everywhere it is required to do so, as we have done in the past."
Secretary of State Marco Rubio also weighed in, saying that Israel advised the US that the attack was necessary. The Trump administration, Rubio says, has taken the necessary steps to protect US forces. Rubio ended by writing, quote, "Let me be clear, Iran should not target US interests or personnel." Obviously, this is the big news, Amber. I found it interesting in other parts of Rubio's statement. He had made very clear that Israel had acted unilaterally in this attack, seeming to some extent to distance the United States from what had occurred. Now, when President Trump came out and gave his Truth Social commentary, there was no real distance apparent between him and Netanyahu, or the US and Israel, in that respect. I would prefer there to be distance. I thought Rubio's statement was better, but he's not the president. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, I think we've been wagged a bit, right? I mean, earlier this week, there were all of these reports that Trump was warning Israel not to strike Iran, that he wanted to continue negotiations, but then after the attacks happened, the statements from Trump make pretty clear that he was at least aware of the attack, probably gave them the green light, and also mentioned the fact that they were at day 61 of the 60-day ramp for negotiations that he had given them, and warning that the attacks would be worse. So what they're trying to do now, I think, is split the difference between, yes, the U.S. knew about it and perhaps gave Israel permission, but was not involved in planning or executing or
direct involvement.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that may be the distinction they're trying to draw. I think a couple of things. One, it is just a fact that Iran has now pulled out of the talks that had been scheduled for this weekend. And I think that is understandable from their perspective. One can dislike the Islamic nature of that regime and still see why a government whose nation has just been bombed wouldn't want to be seen to be cooperating or to becoming more pliant with the US in these kinds of talks. In relation to the closeness that you spoke of, I think that is a shame, because one of the topics that we had spoken about, not just this week but on other occasions, had been what we perceive to be, even among some American conservatives, a greater resistance or ambivalence, at least, to just backing up Israel under any circumstances, especially when it is led by Benjamin Netanyahu, who has, by far the most right-wing cabinet in Israel's history, but more to the point, has his own personal and political reasons for keeping conflict going. His government only just about survived earlier this week, not relating to Gaza for once, directly at least, but relating to whether the ultra-Orthodox should have to serve in the Israeli military.
Yeah, no, I agree that I was earlier in the week kind of happy that it seemed like Trump was sending a warning to Israel, but now it appears that he was just trying to trick us, essentially, which is
well, either he was trying to trick us, or the Israel did it, and he felt he'd no other option than to go along with it.
Yeah, that's possible. That's possible. He felt he had no option. I think part of it was maybe trying to divert attention for the Iranians to not think that a strike was coming, because surely Israel wouldn't do it without the permission of the U.S. So maybe that kind of had them let their guard down a bit. Maybe he's aware of the fact that his base is already skeptical of Israel and didn't want to be seen as being so gung-ho about the idea. I mean, there's a lot of different explanations for the sort of contradictory statements that we've received over the past few days. Obviously, next steps will be what kind of response Iran is planning. Will they actually attempt to hit U.S. targets in the Middle East, which seems the most likely place? Obviously, they're going to respond to Israel. Rubio warning them not to go after the U.S., but they already said before the attacks even happened, when the reports were out that Israel was planning it, that would be something they would do.
Yeah, and Iran has certainly been reported to have fired drones back at Israel in response. I think this is sometimes one of the challenging things about doing a show on such a fast-moving story, because maybe by the time people see this, the situation will have changed dramatically. But obviously the Iranians are going to strike back more than just sending a few drones out. We'll have to see the effectiveness of that, of those efforts, because obviously the Iranians in previous moments during the past couple of years have not been terribly militarily effective, and that effectiveness has been blunted by Israel. In relation to the US, I think Iran would be very strategically foolish to strike US targets directly, but it does point to the dangers of the United States, I think, getting dragged into, a broader regional war, because obviously if Iran directly hit American targets, America has to respond.
Of course.
Then you get into a whole morass that I think is potentially very dangerous.
Yeah, I think long term that would be a strategic blunder for the Iranians. The other question is, how much did this latest strike impact their ability to respond militarily? Some top generals apparently being taken out in what appears to be a pretty targeted attack. So that will affect both the planning aspect and the rapidity of which they can respond.
Yeah, and just one final point on the strategy element of this. The Trump administration makes the argument that they're intent on sort of remaking the Middle East in a larger way, getting certain Gulf states that have better relations with the US to normalize relations with Israel, or to proceed further down that path. To me, this Israeli strike puts that further in the distance, and we've seen statements from the governments of Saudi Arabia and Qatar and other places condemning the Israeli action. So I think that is part of this whole diplomatic picture.
Yeah, sure. That's an important point as well. Up next, outrage from both sides after Secret Service forcibly removed a disruptive senator from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem's press conference yesterday. We've got the video coming up.